Welcome to Visionary Voices Exchange, the podcast that disrupts how we think about blindness and low vision. So join us as we amplify the voices of individuals, families, and professionals living, learning, and thriving with blindness and low vision. We're your hosts, Janet Lebrecht and Carlos Servan.
Welcome, everyone. This is Janet Lebrecht. Welcome to Visionary Voices Exchange. And we have an amazing guest who is joining us today, Mr. John Ficca. I have known John for many years in the rehabilitation field, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for you all to hear from him and to hear what he's up to, because John has been a major contributor to the rehabilitation process and certainly helping consumers with a range of disabilities to acquire both job training and skill sets and career exploration through his particular program titled Hands-On Education Services. So, John, welcome.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing what we're doing and reconnecting with you. As you said, we've known each other for many, many years, and it's always cool to meet up and catch up.
Yeah, and I've always loved this program, as you know, Hands-On Education Services. So why don't we start by talking about what led you to be doing this type of work?
I think that, I've done a lot of reflecting on how the heck I landed in this field, but I always come back to the fact that I enjoy helping people. When I was 18, I joined the U.S. Coast Guard, and I was in the Coast Guard for 10 years. And what does the Coast Guard do? We help save lives, we enforce the laws, but we're helping people. And then when I departed from the Coast Guard, I went back to college and got my degree in special education because I wanted to be a teacher. And then after I was teaching, my degree's in behavioral disorders, and I worked in special ed in Hillsborough County and Pinellas County in Florida. And after several years, I just I realized that there's so many young students who I call the in-betweeners. They don't really need supported employment or a full-time job coach, but yet they're not going to college for whatever reason. And so it kind of motivated me to explore some type of alternative way to help people get into a career. And I was talking to a VR counselor that I worked with in the school system, and we talked about the need for alternative programs. And he kind of hit me on the shoulder and said, well, do something about it. And I was like, wow, you don't have to hit me. And what he was doing was encouraging me to move forward. And so I met with the state director in Florida of the vocational rehabilitation agency and got some guidance and support. And then we started our first program in June of 1998 and had a wonderful partner in Hyatt. And Hyatt hotels, they share the same vision in that they want their hotels to reflect the community. And they have always included people with disabilities in their diversity initiatives. And so they were doing a program called Focus on Abilities before 1990, when the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted. So they were very proactive. And so a short answer is I've always liked helping people. The more complex answer is I knew I wanted to do it in a way that would help people get gainful employment. Mm-hmm. And the hospitality industry does not require a college degree, but yet it can produce a fulfilling career with good pay and benefits. And we live in this country where there's this myth that if you don't get a 4-year degree, you can't be successful. And I kind of grew up in the hotel industry and the restaurant industry, and I knew managers that were making very good money, and they didn't even have a high school diploma. And so I think that was one of the biggest challenges, was convincing education people that you could do this without a high reading level or whatever. So that's the motivation in it, and it's basically an 80-hour or a 2-week paid internship at a Hyatt hotel, and we also partner with the VR agencies, and so we use the state funding to reimburse Hyatt for those 80 hours.
Mm-hmm. And maybe talk about the structure of the program. So it's an 80-hour training program, and talk about, before we actually dive into what can individuals expect to be doing during this time. But I'm very much interested in your partnership with the Hyatt, as you spoke about, and it's so obvious that Hyatt, certainly exhibited visionary, certainly ideas about inclusion, and certainly trying to obviously expand their workforce, but to have an inclusive workforce. So what was that like to get that started with Hyatt?
Well, I tell you, Janet, I couldn't be more lucky, fortunate, blessed, whatever way you want to frame that, because I reached out to Hyatt first, and my goal was to get with a hotel chain, and I'm so glad they said yes, because what I found out later is that they are different than other hotel chains. They have a culture of caring, but they're not 100% stock driven. So their focus is on taking care of your external and internal guest, and not just the ones coming through the front door, but the ones coming through the back door. And so I don't want to say it was easy, because there were a lot of details to be worked through the first year. But I happened to knock on the door of an employer that was a perfect match. Their Hyatt's purpose, they don't have a mission statement. They have a purpose, and their purpose is, we care for people so they can be their best.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
I like that.
And they aren't talking about, oh, we take care of all of our customers or all of our guests and every day. And, you hear all these mission statements, and they wanted to make it simple. And if you take care of people, take care of your internal guests, your employees, they'll take care of your external guests. And then they went a little bit further. I was talking to the vice president of HR, and I said, help me wrap my head around that, caring about people so they can be their best. And they said, we've always expected our associates to take care of our guest. Now we're expecting them to care about them. Mm-hmm. and care about each other. And I was like, whoa, how do you mandate that? How do you, it's one thing to say, do your job. It's another thing to say, really care about the people you're serving. And he said it was it's a lot of training, and it's all focused on empathy. And, how would you feel if you were in that situation? So when you're partnering with an organization like Hyatt, in my mind, they're not even a company. They're just a big family, and they're focused on taking care of each other. That's our family members. And so it was a perfect match. I've learned so much from them, and they've learned from us. And an interesting note, Janet, is that not too long ago, somebody asked me, can you share the contract that you have with Hyatt? And I said, you mean like an MOU or something? And they said, yeah, something that you have on paper. And I said, you're going to laugh, but there's nothing on paper. It was a handshake and a smile and an agreement that we're all going to work hard on this. And so Hyatt could actually tell us to leave anytime, and we could walk away at any time. There's nothing contractually keeping us doing this. But yet here we are 28 years later at Hyatt's all over the country. And it just started with a little program in Tampa, Florida. And now we're operating from Florida to Washington State. So I'm very fortunate that the first door I knocked on was the right door.
Well, and that in itself is so unique and unusual, when you think about where we are today with, partnerships and the work that it takes, but also those agreements that are always important, to have in place, that it's unusual to see an employer like a Hyatt hotel really build the relationship and the trust in you, obviously, that they have, and certainly the impact and the experience, I think, speak for themselves in terms of the outcomes that have come from being a participant in that particular program. So maybe talk for a moment about what would one expect to actually engage in. If they applied for this particular program, how would they do it? And what can they expect as part of the training process?
Okay, well, the majority of our participants are referred to us by vocational rehabilitation counselors in the various states that we operate, and we do have a few self-pay, and and when I say vocational rehab, I am talking about Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and Division of Blind Services. Every state operates a little bit different, but VR is VR. Whether you're under the DBS side or the DVR side, and whether it's the same agency or they're separate agencies. But we have also had referrals from workers' compensation and the VA, and then several self-pay clients. But the way the process works is once somebody's interested in hospitality and they have a documented disability, they apply for our program, and we identify the location that they want to train in terms of what city, and then what departments they're interested in. And culinary is a real hot ticket because of all those stupid food channels. And I say that because I'm a cook by trade. And I cooked my way through college, and I was a cook in the Coast Guard. And cooks and chefs, we kind of watch those shows to get some ideas. But unfortunately, a lot of young people are watching those food channels and food shows, and they think it's glamorous.
Oh,
And
sure.
So it's kind of it's making them think, wow, all I got to do is go to some real expensive culinary school, and I'm going to be a chef tomorrow. And that's not true.
Yeah.
It's nice, but some of the best chefs never went to culinary school. And I would say about at least 50% of the sous chefs never went to culinary school.
Really?
And sous chefs are managers that are under the chef, and they make a good salary, and it's a managerial position. And so that's our big ticket or attractive position because of television. But we also train in housekeeping, laundry, security, guest services, banquets, restaurant greeters, and server assistants. One of my favorite stories, Hyatt actually put on their internal site in October when they were celebrating Disability Awareness Month. They were focusing or highlighting this success story. And this young man in Orlando, went through our program and trained in the kitchen. And after he was finished, his name is Caesar. And after he was finished, he came up to us and said, "Chef said he doesn't have an opening, but I don't want to leave. I'll take anything. I love the people here. I love this place." And so we directed him to HR and said, "Tell them that." And so he told HR how much he loved it. And they said, "Well, we love you too. And so you look at this list of openings we have and let us know which one you want to apply for." And he looked at them and he said, what's a bar back?" He was 18 years old and he didn't know what that meant. And they said, "Oh, that's the person that assists the bartenders, getting them ice and supplies and stuff." And he goes, "I'll do it. I'll do anything." Well, he was a bar back for 6 months, and then he was promoted, and he's been there 13 years now.
Wow.
And he won a Golden Pineapple Award, which is a kind of a prestigious award for the Orlando Hotel and Lodging Association. And he makes a good salary. He's got a 401k. He's got real good health insurance. Hyatt employees or associates, they get 12 free nights anywhere they want to go. And so if he goes to Savannah or New York, he can get a free hotel room. And when they go there, they get 50% off of food and beverage. So no hotel chain offers benefits like that. So this young man, his life has been changed. And he's just one of our many success stories. And you know what? He could have gone to college and got his degree and worked in a field, but I doubt he would have made as much as he makes now. and also he's been employed since he was 18. And so that's just one of the areas that they can train, recreation. And then what we do is we coach them up. We say, "All right, you're going to start on this date. And it's 80 hours, and it's usually done over 2 weeks." And we tell them, just think of it like a real job. You're going to get paid. You're clocking in and out. And, if you look at it like a real job, it will turn into a working interview. And so a lot of our students are hired out of it because Hyatt has that opportunity to see how they're doing, like Caesar. And Hyatt always says, hire for attitude, train for skill.
Yes.
You can't teach the personality stuff. You can't teach that. So we're, I would say anything you can imagine in the hotel industry, we're open to training. Some of the hotels have some limitations in terms of departments. Keep in mind, we work with small hotels, big hotels, resorts. It's really they have a big spectrum in terms of the types of hotels and positions that they could train in. And after the 80 hours, they get a certificate of completion signed by the department head and the general manager. And it has that logo of the Hyatt on there. And that, I call it a ticket to work. People in the rehab industry think of a different program when they hear ticket to work or ticket. But Hyatt is not obligated to hire any of our students, but yet they've hired probably about 20%. And what that does is legitimize what we're doing.
Sure.
And so if they don't get hired by Hyatt for whatever reason, they can take those transferable skills like you were referring to, and that certificate and the experience. And the most valuable thing is they have a recent employment reference from a reputable employer.
And that is so important because that is one of the places that individuals with disabilities, especially if they haven't had the opportunity to really experience early work, like most of their peers. You start as a teenager, you're getting a job in the community, And many individuals with disabilities don't necessarily have that opportunity. And this is one of the things that I really love about the program is that you provide that, because it's important and it's so motivating. And individuals often think that, well, I'm going to go to a job training program and I'll get a certificate. But it's not just that certificate, as you said. It's also about building those transferable skills. But even beyond that, it's also about building the confidence, the awareness, the ability to self-determine, the ability to advocate, for yourself. And by providing, those references and that experience, you're putting people in position where they're ready to go on to the next phase, the next employer. And not all of the locations, obviously, are training in Orlando. Is that correct?
No, we're at four different Hyatts in Orlando, Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, and then we're in Denver, Seattle, and Indian Wells, California, and Minneapolis.
Yeah, so great. And that really does help to provide some, opportunities for folks that think that they want to be in that industry, because then they can go back to their respective states and take those transferable skills with them.
Yes, and that's really what we're trying to do. You mentioned something about a recent employment reference, how important that is, because in rehab we talk about barriers to employment. Mm-hmm. And one of them might be training, one of them might be childcare, one of them might be housing, or one of them might be transportation. But there's another barrier that hurts people, and that is the employment gaps. And in any application, it says, "Where's the last place you worked?" And if you have an employment gap of 3 years or even 3 months, sometimes that can cause you to not be considered for that position. So we tell our students right now, you're an employee of Hyatt, and so go out there and start applying, because that recent employment reference has an expiration.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
They look at me like I'm crazy, and they go, "That certificate expires?" No, it's that if you don't start applying right now and you apply 6 months from now it's not recent. And so you want to get out there, and the majority of our students, they come, they get psyched, their confidence is up, they're a hua like a kid at a boot camp in the Army. They're all pumped and they're ready to go. And I truly believe it's because they realize they can do this type of work. Mm-hmm. And they may have doubted that before.
Sure. I think also you work with individuals that have a range of disabilities. Talk about, some of the opportunities for those individuals, but also what I love about this is that because not everybody has the same type of disability that may be working together, it does reflect more of the competitive integrated employment model. So they're out there, they're working with others in the community, they're working alongside of other Hyatt employees also, and then they can take those skill sets back, into their respective communities. So talk a little bit about, some of the challenges maybe that, depending on what the disability is. But I know that regardless of what those challenges are, I've seen it personally, within your program, that individuals can overcome some significant barriers and challenges themselves also. And it's how motivating it is for them to be alongside other peer, but alongside other Hyatt colleagues as well while they're training.
The Hyatt being a caring culture, they're just very good at helping these. Most of them are young adults, but we have some older, or what I call more mature clients as well, and they're real good at helping them see, or to focus on what they can do and not their limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very accommodating, but um, I, I think a better way to say it is in 28 years ago, I would have to prepare every manager for I've got this young man with autism, or I've got this gentleman who's deaf, or I've got this female that's visually impaired. And what's happened over 28 years is we have done the ultimate in rehab. We've turned our Hyatt partners into job coaches, and they are providing a lot of the supports that you would typically see or traditionally see from a local provider,
Mm-hmm.
from a local job coach. And an example is they used to call me all the time. Hey, I've got an issue here. And then now I'll hear about it a week later and I'll say, why didn't you call me or why didn't you text me or whatever? And they'll say, oh, we took care of it, because they realize now, if we treat them like a new hire, if we treat them like an employee, what would we do with a regular employee? Would we call somebody else? No, we would take care of it. We would help them work through it. And so I think the bigger challenges, you know, are disabilities that affect behavior. Because a lot of people, no matter how caring they are, they're not sure, if they're happy or if they're into it or whatever. But we've had people with all kinds of conditions, visual impairments. What I've learned about the blind agencies is that I've never done the research and know the percentages. You could probably tell me, Janet, but most of them have some level of vision.
Right.
And so, a lot of times we hear the word blind and we think, oh, they can't see anything. And we have a class starting Thursday in Jacksonville, and we have 3 candidates that are visually impaired, but their mobility is good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think any of them use a cane or anything. They have enough vision where they can get through the hotel and get to their workstation. And so we've had many with that type of disability. We've had so many deaf students that I had to go back to school to learn sign language because I was so frustrated that I couldn't give them instant feedback, because they deserve instant feedback just like the hearing folks. And I didn't want to play charades. And so I went back to school, and I'm not a certified interpreter. That was never my goal, but I don't need an interpreter to have a conversation with a person who's deaf. And so that's an interesting population as well, because it's usually not about physical ability or even intellectual. It's about communication. And, there's nothing more culturally diverse than a hotel. You can have 15 languages being spoken in the cafeteria. And so why not ASL?
Sure.
It's just a form of English, and I don't want to oversimplify it, because if somebody was listening to this and said, I can't believe he compared ASL to English, you know what? It came to me a lot faster because my wife is half Puerto Rican and I took 2 semesters of Spanish in college, and I live in Florida where there's a lot of Hispanic people, but I can't speak Spanish. But when I started taking ASL, it came to me quickly because deaf people think in English. They think using English words. And unless you're from another country, and then it's a different type. But so we've had people with all kinds of disabilities, up to and including epilepsy and other physical conditions that we have to think about and prepare the Hyatt for. But I would say the majority of our students have some type of learning disability or
Mhm.
processing deficit.
Well, it's interesting because when you think about the training program and the type of skill sets that they're working on, one of the things that I really like about this particular model also is that, I would consider this work-based learning. So work-based learning really means that you're in an environment where you're learning about what is going on in that particular work environment. What are the skills necessary to work in that particular field? What kinds of experiences, are you going to have? But it's also a great opportunity for individuals who haven't necessarily had that early work experience to try these skill sets out, but also to model behavior. How do people behave in the workplace? What does the daily schedule look like? And it teaches individuals those self-advocacy skills, because you need to be able to, just as you said, when you're communicating with individuals who are deaf, you need to be able to have those conversations. You need to make them feel as though they are a critical part, and they are, of that work-based learning environment, but that they're not the only ones that are learning. Others, colleagues and other people that are there, a part of that whole program, are learning from them as well. And so I love this work-based model, and this, learning model also that they get from this, because it does give them the opportunity to really model the behavior, to learn, did I really want to be a chef? Because and sometimes you may not want to, and be thinking, well, I thought this might be something different. I really don't want to do this, but I might
Right.
like to do something else, which is where those transferable skill sets come in. So I think that that's very unique and really helpful about this type of a program.
Yeah, and when we first met in Massachusetts, I believe, I could tell that you could smell what we were cooking
Yes.
in the hands-on Hyatt kitchen, because those work-based, they weren't as prevalent as they are now, and there's a lot of VR agencies that are working more towards that, and part of it is the legislation that you helped push in 2014, and in these work-based experiences, and clients actually that are potentially eligible. We've never had that. Was unprecedented, because if they weren't in plan, VR couldn't pay for anything. And then now with these new regulations that you helped establish when you were the commissioner of RSA, you I remember you saying, we're giving them creative freedom. Think outside,
Yes.
and I think it's taken over 10 years, but I think that more and more people are understanding what that means now.
Hmm.
And I'm very proud of the fact that we were kind of on the cutting edge in 1998. In 2014, when you were finalizing that legislation, I remember thinking, wow, we've been doing this for 15, 16 years. And now it's finally in writing that, when they reauthorized the Workforce Investment Act, it's finally in writing. We need to focus on these types of work-based experiences that allow them to really understand. Like when our students come in there, I tell the Hyatt folks and the students, you're not going to be shadowing. You're going to be working. And after 2 weeks, you might say, hey, this is cool, and I think I could do this. I could pursue this career. Or you might say, time out. This stinks. I don't want to do this. It's too hard.
Hmm.
Because it's not like it is on TV. And that's okay, too. You've only spent 2 weeks of your life. And so, that's what internships do for you, is to give you a reality. I say it's reality to the max. Like our culinary students, we give them a set of chef's knives. And when VR pays the funding, that includes those chef's knives, and we teach them how to use them. And they're in chef's jackets. They look, if you walk in the kitchen and see one of our students, they look like one of the regular employees. And I think that is one of the main reasons why our program is so effective, is that we demand that they see Hyatt as their employer. Some people in education and rehab have heard the word imprinting, like the ducks, the baby
Yes.
duck that follows the first thing that moves. And we tell the students, listen, I know you just met me or one of the training managers, but I'm not your boss. We want you to see your supervisor at Hyatt. And an example is one young lady texted me one time and said, "What time do I go in tomorrow?" And I texted her back, "Why are you texting me?" And she said,
Good point.
and I said, and she responded, and I said, "Remember when we introduced you to your supervisor and gave you their contact information, all that?" I said, "Text your supervisor, and if you don't get the answer you need, let me know." And she texted me back a few minutes later and said, "Oh, yep." She said 8 o'clock. And I said, "Good." But what she learned from that split second, it sounded like I was kind of rude. But what it was is we're trying to teach them that this isn't school. This isn't, Monday through Friday. This isn't, 9 to 5. This is reality to the max. And
Hmm.
we even tell them, if you're not willing to work nights, weekends, and holidays, then you're coming to the wrong program. You're coming to the wrong industry. And we'll purposely have classes start on Sunday. When it allows the parents to attend the orientation, because Sundays usually parents are off. And but on the other side, it reminds them that this hotel is open 7 days a week. And so we're introducing them to an industry that doesn't care about their degrees and their GPAs. They just want you to work hard and take care of the guests. But if you want to call it the negative side, is that you have to be willing to work nights, weekends, and holidays.
Sure. Yeah, and I would imagine, especially when we're in an environment now where all these, cooking shows and they look great and they've got all kinds of cooking competitions, now, and you don't get to see that. They see the polished version, of what the day-to-day, life is like. And that's why I think the work-based learning model works so well, so that they get that true experience. And one of the other things that I also think that I have seen in this particular program, which I think works really well, and it's really meaningful for the individuals that are in this specific program, is the fact that while they're training, they're not just off in a corner somewhere by themselves, training. They're out on the floors also. They're working in the different departments, and so they're getting that real life day-to-day experience of what it means. So that if you're working the dining room, for example, or if you're working and you decided that you wanted to do hospitality and see what end of the hotel industry looks like from that perspective, they're getting out there and they're able to experience that throughout their training. And that is so important because, historically, individuals were, quarantined, if you will, excluded from being in the mainstream, of job training programs, and you're only exposed to each other. And by each other, I mean other individuals with disabilities. And that's what competitive integrated employment means. It means that you're not just segregated, with others who have disabilities. It means that you're in the mainstream. You not only have a right, but the expectation should be that you're out there. You're not just set aside, and that you're able to communicate, and that you're able to have that same experience that anyone else who did not have a disability would have.
Correct, and that's important, because even after 2 weeks, if they said this isn't what I thought, and I don't want to do this, I say, well, look at that. You learned that in only 2 weeks. There are so many people that go to a 2 or a 4 year program in college, and they get out there. And then they realize, wow, I got to work nights, weekends, and holidays, and Super Bowl's in town, so I got to work 14 hours today. And they're frustrated because they didn't realize their expectations were different. And it's really neat. I tell our students that are like, say, the culinary students, I say, you actually have an advantage over the culinary students that are graduating from culinary school. And they look at me like I'm crazy and go, what do you mean? I don't have much experience. And I say, exactly. Because no matter how much education you have, you're going to start at the bottom. You're going to be a prep cook. And so now you have 2 weeks experience and you're willing to chop, dice, and slice all day. Whereas some of these culinary students, we call them hot shots, and they come out of culinary school and they think they're chefs and they're above that.
Yes.
And so you actually have an advantage because you're not disillusioned. You're okay with cutting that fruit all day. And in the production work, the Hyatts have these markets, and it's like a Starbucks on steroids, and it's got all different kind of grab and go food. And one of our students told me one time, said, well, I can't believe it. I made like 200 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches today. That's not very glamorous. And I said, who do you think comes to these resorts? And they just said, oh, people from all over the country. They're in Orlando. They're going to Disney World. Do they have children? Yes, they do. So what do you think those kids want to eat? And so they got a really good peanut butter and jelly sandwich on really good bread. But somebody's got to make that. And chicken tenders. And one of our students back 20 some years ago, when Britney Spears was just starting, she was staying at the Hyatt doing a concert, and she's probably 16, 17, whatever. And one of my students said, oh, John, I got to make sent room service up to Britney Spears. And I said, what did she order? He goes, a club sandwich. He goes, I would think she would want a steak or something. And I said, she's 16. She wants a sandwich or a pizza, But anyway, it's really neat to see these young adults really grasp, whether it's good for them or not, whether they're a good match, and whether they can physically or intellectually handle it. It's not for everybody.
Sure.
And there are some great chefs out there that are awesome, and they can work and cook all around people. And there's some professors in college that are very smart that couldn't do that type of work for a day, much less a career.
So true.
Because it takes a different skill set, especially how you're wired. And if you are wired to do that type of work, you can have a successful career.
Sure.
And we're seeing that.
and there's room for growth in those careers, and which is, what I also like. And you've had many people come through this particular program, and they have grown, and they have, been promoted. And that, again, the integral part and the important part about competitive integrated employment is the reality that you want people, it's okay to come in, to the employment field when you're young, or you haven't had those, those long, many, many years of job training. But whatever it is that you choose as a career path, we always want to promote the fact that you should have that opportunity, to experience promotion, to be able to move beyond maybe what you thought that you would ever do, as a person with a disability. And I think that is why, these types of programs work well, because they do provide that opportunity. It's not a promise, like you said earlier, that everyone will be hired at a Hyatt, but it's a starting point, and it's those transferable skills that can take you beyond, what you thought you could do, and open the doors, for other opportunities just by building the skill sets and the confidence.
Yes. And Janet, I know that you've met this young man who's now an executive chef, but do I have time to just tell that his
Yeah,
backstory?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
He came to our program in 2003. He was 18 years old. He barely made it through high school. He couldn't pass the state norm test. And so he didn't get what they call a standard diploma. He back in the day in Florida, they used to call it a special diploma, but he knew he wasn't going to college, but he loved cooking. And he came to our program. He got hired by Hyatt. He worked for Hyatt for 2 years. And then one of the sous chefs left and said, "Hey, I'm helping this owner open this restaurant. Do you want to come with me?" And he left and he worked at this restaurant for a couple of years. And then he ended up at a Renaissance hotel. And I don't know, it was about 8 years later, he went to our website and he said, I'm looking for, he hit contact us and he said, "I'm looking for John Ficca. Are you still with Hands On Education?" And I emailed him back and said, "Hi, Andrew, I am still here." And I said, "And by the way, congratulations," because his signature said executive chef.
Wow.
And yeah, so that kind of reconnected us, and he's since been promoted many more times. And a personal special moment for me is my daughter was married 2.5 years ago, and the rehearsal dinner was catered by him. And he did it at his hotel, and he did a really great job. And there were about 50, 60 people. And I got up, I was the proud dad, and I grabbed the microphone and said, this is really cool because one of my students is the executive chef at this hotel, and he's preparing this meal for my daughter. And when I met him, my daughter was 9 years old.
Wow.
When she got married, his daughter was 9 years old. And so how cool is that, we're coming full circle. And then now he's bugging me every day going, "When are you going to send me some people to train?" He wants to pay it forward.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he looks at those new students and goes, "Man, I went through this program. I'm just like you. I don't take tests well, but I love cooking. I love being a chef." And so he really inspires them. He inspires me. But we have a lot of success stories. Not everybody is going to strive to be the executive chef, and not everybody wants to be the top dog. There are a lot of people in every industry that are happy being somewhere in the middle because they
Yes.
don't want the extra responsibility.
Absolutely. That is so true. And I want to thank you so much for sharing the information. But I think most importantly, I want to thank you for your passion and just for you being you, because as many years as I've known you, you have never lost the enthusiasm or the belief in individuals with disabilities. And I just want to let our audience know that you received that award, the Champion of Change, Champions for Change Award, because of the impact that you do have in this particular program. But I strongly believe that the program is successful not only because of you, because of Hyatt, but also because of the commitment that both of you have made for giving opportunity and allowing people to express who they are and learn in an environment that is open and that is inclusive. And that truly is the definition of inclusion. And so I want to thank you for joining us, and let's stay in touch. And thank you again for joining us today on Visionary Voices Exchange.
Thank you, Janet. It was my pleasure, and I'm sure that you're going to put out some contact information if anybody wants to get more information. But thanks
Why don't you go ahead and give that, John?
Okay, it's handsoneducation.net is our website. And on Facebook, it's at hands-on at Hyatt. And they can find us. But I'm glad you picked up on the passion part, Janet, because You're right. I am passionate about what I do. I think that when you lose your passion, you should think about doing something else.
Yes,
My oldest brother is a professional musician,
I
and I
do.
called him about 10 years ago and I said, Sandy, I'm just like you now. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, I get paid for doing something I love.
Yeah, yes.
And I that's my prayer and my wish for everybody. Find something you really love, and the money is not going to even matter to you.
Yes. Again, thank you so much. Best of luck to you, and let's stay in touch.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.